The air over Arlington National Cemetery was a heavy blanket of reverence, thick with the silence of heroes. Tourists stood in hushed awe before the tomb of the unknown soldier, where Sergeant Evan Carter, a sentinel in the deep blue dress uniform of the old guard, was a statue carved from pure discipline. Then, 3 black SUVs shattered the peace, and out stepped Lieutenant Carl Rains, his SWAT gear and arrogant swagger a profane intrusion. He smirked at the unmoving guard, a predator eyeing a monument. Then, with a crackle of electricity that desecrated the sacred silence, the unthinkable happened. Before I show you exactly how the most disciplined soldier in the U.S. Army responded, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment telling us where you're watching from. Now, let's get into it. The humid summer air over Arlington was heavy with history and respect, a silence that was about to be broken. The late afternoon sun cast long, somber shadows across the pristine marble of the plaza. Every sound was magnified, the distant cry of a cicada, the soft shuffle of tourist feet, the crisp, rhythmic click of heels from the guard pacing his 21 steps. It was a place where people lowered their voices without being told, instinctively understanding they were on hallowed ground. At the center of this sacred stage stood Sergeant Evan Carter. To the dozens of onlookers filming with their phones, he was a perfect symbol, an anonymous figure of dedication. His dark blue uniform was so perfectly pressed, it seemed unreal, the creases sharp enough to draw blood. The M14 rifle on his shoulder was held at a precise, unwavering angle. His face, shaded by his cap, was a mask of emotionless focus. But beneath that flawless exterior was a man forged in a different kind of fire. Carter had walked the dusty roads of Helmand Province for 3 tours. He knew the sickening thud of incoming mortar fire and the high-pitched crack of a sniper's bullet passing too close. A jagged scar ran down his left side, a permanent reminder from a roadside bomb that ached with the memory of shrapnel and sand. He had learned discipline not on a parade ground, but in firefights where a moment's hesitation meant death. But none of that was visible. He was a sentinel, a guardian, a living monument to the fallen. And that was all the world needed to see. That was about to change. Across the plaza, 3 menacing black SUVs had ignored the authorized vehicle's only signs, rolling onto the ceremonial approach with an aggressive confidence that made the cemetery's honor guard shift uncomfortably. They weren't dignitaries. They weren't a Gold Star family. They bypassed every protocol, their tinted windows reflecting the pristine white tomb with disdain. The doors opened, and out stepped Lieutenant Carl Rains. He was in his early 40s, with a tactical vest worn open over a polo shirt, mirrored sunglasses, and the kind of self-satisfied smirk that announced his belief that he was the most important person in any room. Behind him, 4 of his SWAT team members fanned out, their gear and heavy-handed presence a jarring contrast to the quiet dignity of the place. 2 cemetery stewards, older men in formal suits, approached with polite urgency. "Excuse me, sir. This is a restricted area for ceremonial duties only." Rains flashed a badge without breaking stride. "Lieutenant Rains, Tactical Exchange Program. Joint Ops Oversight." He waved a dismissive hand. "Relax, fellas. We're just observing your boy in the fancy suit." He stepped right over the low chain barrier, swaggering toward the tomb. His men followed, smirking. Carter didn't react. Not a flicker of an eye, not a twitch of a muscle. He remained locked on his duty. His world shrunk to the 21 steps of his patrol. Rains circled him like a shark, chewing on a protein bar. "I've seen mannequins with more life in him," he said loudly to his team. "Bet you $50 he's asleep under that hat." A few nervous chuckles rippled through the tourists. The steward stepped closer, his voice firm. "Sir, you are violating federal regulations and disrespecting this sacred site. I must ask you to return behind the barrier." Rains ignored him. What's he gonna do? Stare me to death? He got closer, his face just inches from Carter's. "Hey buddy, you blink, you lose." Is that the deal? The silence from Carter was absolute, a wall of pure, unadulterated discipline. This infuriated Rains. He was a man used to command, to immediate responses. The Sentinel's refusal to acknowledge him was a personal affront. "This is what you call security?" he scoffed, turning to the crowd. "A guy in a costume who can't even move? This is a joke." He pulled out a black object with yellow markings. "A taser. Let's see if this statue has a nervous system." The steward lunged. "Sir, no," but he was too late. The taser clicked, and 2 darts shot out, embedding themselves in Carter's thigh. The crackle of 50,000 volts tore through the sacred silence. Carter's entire body went rigid. His knuckles turned white on his rifle. A single bead of sweat traced a path down his temple. He absorbed the agonizing shock, his jaw clenched so tight it was a miracle his teeth didn't shatter. He did not cry out. He did not fall. He did not even flinch. When the current stopped, he remained at his post, motionless, staring into eternity. The electric crackle faded, leaving a silence that was heavier and more profound than before. It was a vacuum, filled with the collective shock of every person who had just witnessed an act of desecration. The tourists stood frozen, their phones lowered, their faces a mixture of disbelief and disgust. Lieutenant Raines let out a short, self-satisfied chuckle, but the sound died in the oppressive quiet. Nobody was laughing with him. He had expected a reaction, a yelp, a fall, a break in formation that would prove his point about ceremonial soldiers being all show. Instead, he got nothing. He had unleashed a painful, incapacitating weapon on a man, and the man had simply absorbed it. The victory felt hollow, and a flicker of unease began to penetrate his arrogant facade. Carter stood as if nothing had happened. His breathing was steady, his posture perfect, but the evidence of the assault was there for all to see. The 2 thin wires leading from the taser cartridge on the ground to the small, dark scorch marks on his immaculate blue trousers. Inside the nearby guardhouse, a military police sergeant who had been monitoring the exchange on a security camera set down his coffee with a deliberate calm and spoke quietly into his radio. He didn't run. He didn't shout. He just started moving. Within 60 seconds, a U.S. Army military police sergeant emerged. He wore his standard-issue uniform, not dress blues, and carried himself with the quiet authority of a career NCO. He approached Raines with a steady, measured pace that spoke of countless de-escalations. "Sir, I'm going to need you to step away from the Sentinel immediately." Raines turned, his smirk returning, though it was now strained. "Easy there, Sergeant. Just a little interagency training exercise. Didn't damage your living statue." The MP's eyes were like chips of ice. "This is a restricted military zone under federal jurisdiction. You have just assaulted a United States soldier while he was performing his duties." "Assaulted?" Raines scoffed, his voice rising. "It's a taser, not a cannon. A non-lethal training tool. Look at him, he barely felt it." The MP's gaze didn't waver. "Sir, step back. Now." The command was spoken without volume, but with the unmistakable weight of authority. Raines' men began to shift nervously, the casual arrogance draining from their faces. Just then, another figure arrived, walking with a purpose that instantly commanded attention. Captain Eva Rostova, Carter's company commander in the Old Guard. She was in her mid-30s, her hair pinned in a perfect regulation bun, her uniform radiating a crisp authority that made Raines' tactical vest look like a cheap costume. She walked straight past Raines, as if he were a piece of furniture, stopping directly in front of her soldier. She didn't inspect the wound. She didn't raise her voice. She simply looked up at Carter's unwavering face. "Sergeant Carter," she said, her voice clear and calm, cutting through the tension. "Are you capable of continuing your post?" For the briefest of moments, a muscle in Carter's jaw flexed. It was the first human response he had shown. Then, without moving his eyes from the horizon, he spoke. His voice was steady, disciplined, and carried across the silent plaza. "Still fit for duty, ma'am." The words landed with the force of a hammer blow. It was a testament to a level of fortitude Raines couldn't possibly comprehend. Captain Rostova gave a single, sharp nod of acknowledgement. Then she turned to the MP sergeant. "Secure these individuals. They are to be held for observation. No external communication until this situation is properly adjudicated." "Ma'am." Raines barked out a laugh of disbelief. "You can't be serious. You're detaining us." Captain Rostova turned her head slowly, and for the first time, fixed her gaze on him. It was cold, analytical, and utterly dismissive. "You are under review, Lieutenant." And with those words, the power dynamic on the plaza shifted irrevocably. The swaggering SWAT cop had just discovered he was on someone else's turf, and the rules he thought he knew no longer applied. The first sound was a low, distant rumble, a synchronized purr of powerful engines that was distinctly not tourist traffic. It grew steadily, a sound of disciplined purpose. Then, from the direction of Memorial Drive, they appeared. 3 black Chevrolet Suburbans, the kind used by the Secret Service and high-level government officials, swept into view. They were led by a motorcycle escort of 2 MPs, their lights flashing silently, clearing a path that was already empty. The convoy didn't slow as it approached the main entrance to the cemetery. Instead, it made a deliberate, unscheduled turn and came to a complete stop, blocking the entire ceremonial approach. The engines idled with a quiet hum, the tinted windows revealing nothing of who was inside. But their presence was a statement, a silent, unmoving testament that the highest levels of command were now aware of the situation. They weren't intervening, not yet. They were simply watching. Raines stared, his jaw slack. The forced bravado he had clung to finally shattered. "You've got to be kidding me," he muttered, more to himself than anyone else. Is that a general in there?" He tried for a joke, but his voice cracked. "What's he here for? To promote the mannequin?" No one laughed. His own men stood rigidly, eyes fixed forward, avoiding his gaze. The tourists seemed to hold their breath, sensing that the drama had escalated into something far more significant. The temperature on the plaza seemed to drop several degrees. The rear door of the lead Suburban opened, and out stepped Colonel Marcus Thorne. If Hollywood needed to cast a senior military officer, they would choose a man who looked exactly like him. He was tall, with close-cropped silver hair and a face that looked like it was carved from granite. His Army service uniform was immaculate, adorned with ribbons that told a story of decades of service, including a silver star and a purple heart. He moved with an unhurried grace that radiated absolute authority. He didn't look at Raines. He didn't acknowledge the SWAT team or the MPs. He walked with a singular focus, his polished shoes making no sound on the marble, until he stood directly beside Sergeant Carter. Without a word, Colonel Thorne removed his white dress gloves with methodical precision. Then, with the gentle care of a surgeon, he reached down and lifted the scorched fabric of Carter's trousers. The burn mark from the taser dart was a dark, ugly circle against the deep blue wool. The skin beneath was already beginning to welt. The evidence of the assault was stark, undeniable, and deeply insulting in its intimacy. Thorne examined the wound for no more than 3 seconds, his expression unreadable. He then let the fabric fall back into place and gave a single, almost imperceptible nod. He turned, not to Raines, but to Captain Rostova. "This is now a matter of command interest," he said, his voice quiet but carrying the weight of a thunderclap. "Activate Protocol 47B. Captain Rostova's response was immediate and crisp. "Understood, sir." Now Raines found his voice, a desperate, pleading tone replacing his earlier arrogance. "Wait a minute. Command interest? Protocol? For this?" I tapped him with a training device. "He's fine." Colonel Thorne finally turned his gaze upon Raines, and for the first time, the SWAT lieutenant seemed to shrink. Thorne's eyes were devoid of anger or any discernible emotion. They were simply the eyes of a man who had seen real conflict and was now looking at something utterly insignificant. He didn't need to raise his voice. He didn't need to issue threats. The entire United States Army stood behind that calm, chilling gaze. The game was over. Judgment had arrived. What happened next unfolded with the cold, methodical precision of a military drill. There were no raised voices, no dramatic confrontations. It was simply the quiet, efficient dismantling of one man's entire world. Colonel Thorne did not need to shout. He simply gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod to the MP sergeant. One of the MPs stepped forward, his hand extended, palm up. "Sir, I will need your sidearm and any remaining weapons. Please comply." Slowly and deliberately. Raines hesitated for a fraction of a second, his mind clearly racing, searching for an escape route that no longer existed. Then, with a sigh that was a mix of defeat and disbelief, he unholstered his service pistol and placed it butt first into the MP's waiting hand. A second MP collected the taser and the rest of his tactical gear. Each item was tagged and cataloged with bureaucratic dispassion. Colonel Thorne turned to Captain Rostova. "Have Trooper Bell relieved. He is to undergo a full medical assessment. Priority 1. "Yes, sir." Within moments, another Sentinel emerged from the guardhouse. He was a perfect mirror of Carter. Same height, same build, same flawless uniform. The changing of the guard, a ceremony normally performed for the public, was now executed for a different reason. To demonstrate that the duty was eternal and unbreakable, far more important than any one soldier. Carter and his replacement passed each other with razor-sharp precision, their rifles moving in perfect sync. No words were exchanged. Carter was then escorted behind a temporary screen where a medic was waiting. He moved with a slight, almost invisible limp, the only concession his body made to the assault it had endured. He refused the medic's offered arm of support. Raines made one last, desperate attempt to assert himself. "So what happens now? Am I in trouble here? I have diplomatic immunity from a NATO exchange program. You can call the State Department. They'll verify." An aide approached from the convoy, handing Colonel Thorne a sealed folder. Thorne scanned the contents, his expression unchanging. He then looked directly at Raines. "Your authorization to observe this facility was conditional upon your professional conduct. You did not have authorization to engage with active duty personnel, and you most certainly did not have authorization to assault a soldier of the United States Army in the execution of his sacred duties." It wasn't an assault. Raines' voice was reedy now. He didn't even react. Colonel Thorne stepped closer, his voice dropping to a near whisper, yet every word was a dagger. "That man you struck," he began, "commanded a forward observation post in Afghanistan while you were writing traffic tickets. He held his ground for 36 hours under constant fire after his corporal bled out in his arms. He has stood guard over this tomb through hurricanes and blizzards. You subjected him to an electrical assault, and he absorbed it without complaint because his duty is more important than his pain." Thorne leaned in, closing the final gap between them. "And you want to know the most pathetic part of all this, Lieutenant?" Raines was silent, trapped in the colonel's unyielding gaze. "He's not angry with you. He's not even insulted. In the grand scheme of his service and his sacrifice, you simply didn't matter enough to affect him." A longer pause. "No apology you could ever offer will change that fact." Thorne stepped back and handed the folder to Captain Rostova. "Inform the Department of State that the exchange status for Lieutenant Raines and his unit is revoked, effective immediately. Escort them to the perimeter. They are no longer welcome on any U.S. military installation anywhere in the world." As the MPs began to lead a stunned Raines and his team away, the lead vehicle of the convoy finally began to move, gliding silently through the gates. As it passed, a hand in a crisp white glove, bearing the 4 stars of a full general, appeared briefly at the window in a simple, respectful gesture of salute, not to the colonel, but to the tomb and to the unwavering sentinel who guarded it. As dusk settled, casting a warm, golden light over the marble, Sergeant Carter returned to his post. His uniform was fresh, his bearing perfect. His return was not a performance. It was a statement. The events of that afternoon proved that true strength isn't found in aggressive displays or the tools of coercion. It resides in the unshakable bedrock of discipline and a commitment to something greater than oneself, a silent, powerful force that provocation cannot shatter. Have you ever witnessed someone try to publicly humiliate another, only to fail spectacularly? What would you have done if you were a tourist in that crowd, watching it all unfold? In a world that often rewards the loudest voice and the most dramatic reaction, do you think there's still a place for this kind of quiet, unbreakable dignity? Is it a sign of weakness? Or is it the ultimate, most profound form of strength? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. If this story reminded you of the power of true discipline and quiet honor, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about the unsung heroes who uphold our nation's highest ideals. Share this with someone who needs to see what real, unshakable strength looks like, not the cheap imitation that makes all the noise. We read every respectful comment, and your voice matters in these conversations about what we value as a society. More stories about military honor and incredible displays of self-control are waiting on your screen right now. Click on one of those next, and we'll see you tomorrow with another story that proves, time and time again, that true character is forged not in the spotlight, but in the silent, unwavering dedication to duty. It doesn't need to announce itself. It simply stands.